In this episode of Me and My AI, I'm interviewing the co-founder and CEO of Personal AI, Suman Kanuganti. We're going to talk about the original use case that inspired the creation of Personal AI, archiving the expertise and wisdom of legendary entrepreneur and investor Larry Bock, who passed away in 2016. We all have a one-of-a-kind expert in our world, whether it's a parent, a mentor, a colleague, or even yourself. How do you scale access to these unique perspectives, opinions, wisdom, and thought leadership forever? Stick around and find out. Just to get to know him a bit better through his AI. And it's
You
just
should try
such.
talking with the voice as well because his voice is pretty cool.
Oh,
I think, yeah, I should enable that to you and then you can talk to him. Maybe you can do a podcast interview with Larry AI.
welcome back to Me and My AI. This interview series features leaders and business owners who are training their own personal AI to engage with their memories and proprietary information in unique and scalable ways. I'm your host, Marissa Brassfield, and today's interview is a very special one for many reasons. In a few moments, you're going to meet or re-meet Suman Kanuganti, the CEO of Personal AI, and learn about a very special person whose expertise and wisdom is now accessible through Personal AI. Before I introduce Suman, this is the premise of the conversation we're going to walk into today. So how do you scale access to a one-of-a-kind expert's perspectives, opinions, wisdom, and thought leadership in perpetuity around the clock? I mean, this is the big promise of Personal AI. And so I'm really excited to dive into this story and the backstory of how these remarkable AI models are trained. Suman, welcome.
Thanks a lot for having me, Marissa. It's almost role reversal in here because I remember the day when I interviewed you and you are now interviewing back at me. So it's very interesting.
Well, and I imagine this is an interesting experience for you because it wasn't so long ago that I was sitting right next to you in that office. And I'm thrilled for this conversation today because as I've gotten to know you over the years and heard your background, your stories, and just the soul and spirit behind Personal AI, I was just hoping that I would have the opportunity to have you sit and record and share some of these stories in a larger way where others can hear them, because I was so moved. And this is so important as we're working with AI and getting to build trust with these systems, to understand the values and the humans behind these companies is just so important. So I want to commend you and the team for not just what you've created, but who you are.
That's very kind of you, Marissa. Thanks a lot for the words.
Well, for those who may be meeting you and hearing about you for the first time, I'd love if you could share a bit of your origin story, because Personal AI is not your first rodeo, and it's certainly not your first tech business either. So I'd love if you could share just a bit about your entrepreneurial background.
Yeah, I'm an engineer by birth. Soon after I came to United States, I continued my engineering background and with masters in robotics. But back in those days, for me, it was more about creation and building. So I got many different jobs. I went to Caterpillar, Qualcomm, Intuit, um, built many different things. I was also a passionate technologist, if you will, right? So always looking for finer ways of solving a specific problem for a specific group of people. And then I think over a period of time, I picked up passion to create products as well and experiences. And there was some self-finding, and then I got to go get my MBA, which is my second master's here at Brady School of Management, UCSD. And that kind of unlocked or opened up this idea of, oh, I can actually build experiences, products, and build businesses, and create a network around myself. So I started building companies. First company was a smart wallet company, which I shut down within 1 year. It was almost like Apple Pay back in those days. It was too early. So we couldn't move the needle in terms of regulations and whatever lobbying that was required. Within 1 year, we decided to close. But then the next company was IRO, which was my previous company. that was AI as well, but with a strong presence of humans. We call them agents for people who are blind and low vision. These humans essentially teleport into blind people's world to provide experiences for them. Either it be, describing the amazing, Disneyland views, to reading children's books, to, simply being able to independently go to places and travel to places without having to depend on anybody else. So that was a fantastic experience, and I'm glad as of today, pretty much many brands from Amazon to Starbucks to Disney, they all provide IRA as an accessible accommodation for people who are blind. Personally, I carries the principles of this, you know, core idea of augmenting people with technology. Um, with personal AI, it was pretty much broad though, because generally this idea of like individual people and scaling them applies to pretty much everybody on the planet, right? um, so yeah, so that's kind of the genesis stories, and I always get excited more around when the experience is like 0 to 1, not just like 10x 100x, but it's like 1000x. And it fundamentally creates novel newer unlocks for people.
Beautiful. I loved hearing about and learning about your background in accessibility, because that's a big promise for AI, and especially when you can train your own model. So along the way, we stand on the shoulders of giants, and you have had some amazing mentors that you've worked with and partnered up with. Tell us about Larry.
Yes, of course, this interview is about Larry Bock. Larry Bock was my previous co-founder of my previous company, IRA, which I was just describing for people who are blind and low vision. The most interesting thing is I met Larry at a Foundation Fighting Blindness Dining in the Dark event. And I didn't know about Larry before that event, and he was a keynote speaker over there. I learned that he was legally blind by himself at that particular event. And that time, IRA was not even incorporated. It was simply a project, testing and experimenting if this could actually work. This was the early days of Google Glass. So here I am, basically carrying like a couple of Google Glasses, putting them on blind people, and then connecting them to remote agent. And the first remote agent was my wife. She was basically sitting behind the computer and actually navigating them as an experiment. And at that Foundation Fighting Blindness event, my motivation or our goal was to speak to 20, 30, people who are blind people and kind of get some feedback. And through that process, we made enough noise that Larry came up to us and he gave me the card. And the first thing that he said was, you were thinking to solve blind people's problem is very unique. I'm fascinated. I want to learn more. So I took the card. I didn't know about him, back then. And then obviously I went home and I looked him up and realized, basically the amount of impact that he has already created, like, with 27 different companies, including Illumina, which is like, one of the San Diego's favorite company. So I was like thrilled. I was like, and then we, kept in touch, and he took, 4 to 6 months doing the diligence, understanding the different products, understanding how this could be unique. And in December, he came back and say, hey, I want to join you guys. I want to create this company. I want to join as executive chairman and a co-founder. Let's do this thing. So yeah, so that was a little backstory about Larry Bock. But fast forward, just the way he operates and how to bootstrap a company from like nothing to just pushing through the tough times, hard times, finding solutions, finding creative ways to go to the next step is something that I learned from him and incorporated into my daily life.
It's so beautiful. And I've heard you say that the question, what would Larry do, was something that you constantly reflected on. And it's interesting because, we've worked with these busy people who are operating and involved with so many different initiatives and companies and nonprofits. And very often you want that specific lens of expertise just to answer this one question or help troubleshoot a problem. And the biggest challenge is access. Even if you're on the inside of a company, it's the logistics get to be really, really tough. So tell me, yeah.
No, so the accessibility is pretty broad, right? So the idea of accessibility for me exists in every aspects of our life. So, for example, with Ira, what is accessibility? Well, the accessibility is about access to visual information that otherwise they are missing because they cannot see, right? So rather than considering it as a blindness or disability, like, how do you flip the narrative around and make it not a human problem? You know, I always have this mantra of like, don't solve the human, solve the problem, right? So the problem is, oh, they're missing this visual information. So what can you do for that using technology? And you can augment it. So in this case, with Larry, when Larry passed away because of pancreatic cancer, it was devastating for me, and I had almost like cold feet, like if I'm able to move this company forward or not. So I had to work my way out of it. And then, yes, I picked up this mantra of like, what would Larry do? It's almost like trying to give me a framework so that way I can step into his shoes and then almost simulate a conversation and what he would suggest, right? And it is very magical when you're like trying to step into somebody else's shoes and think through it. So in this case, the access is access to minds, access to trust, right? Accessing the people that you trust is very important. That only exists with few people around us. With family, with close friends, with your partners, with your co-founders, and that carries lots of weight. And because you make decisions based on that, it's not just about synthesis of general information. It also is the specific knowledge and specific experiences that you carry, and in that moment, what is the right thing to do. So in here, it's accessibility to people, and accessibility is to people's mind, when especially that access is lost or it's missing. It's missing because, yeah, people are not around us, or they don't have time, or they're out of the reach. The 6 degrees of separation is probably not enough in this digital world. So yeah, so I think the whole genesis of this company is, can we create Larry's AI? Can we create a model that can ground and replicate an individual person in their ideas, in their thoughts, in their memories, in their experiences, and kind of have this cohesive model that people can actually have meaningful and human-like interactions. So yeah, so that's the backstory.
So beautiful. It gives me chills every time. And I'm struck because in this case, of course, Larry passed away. But the use cases are equally relevant for busy people, as you mentioned, people who are traveling a ton, people where there's that 6 degrees of separation. But I'm also thinking about cognitive decline and
Yep.
dementia and Alzheimer's and these things that come on often right when an entrepreneur or an investor or a thought leader or an everyday human is at their prime in
Yep.
terms of cognition and experience. So this is really powerful. So now, Larry passed away in 2016. I'm doing the math on the origin of personal AI. What was the process like to train his AI?
Well, there is a process of creating the company in itself, and there is a process of training his AI. 2016, he passed away, and I think the origins of the thought process, or even being able, just this idea like creating Larry's AI, was a concept, was a dream, right? It was really a dream. And I remember in 2018, one of the conventions, I was sitting with my team members and my co-founders at IRAM, and we were having just like brainstorming and geeking out over drinks on what does it mean to virtually upload ourselves into the cloud. Can people talk to us? And obviously we have seen the science fiction, and we have seen the concepts that existed, the Black Mirror episodes and things of that nature, right? But obviously there is a true utility associated with it, right? It's the novelty of like almost the creation of a phone, right? The idea of like picking up a phone and actually being able to talk to somebody was a science fiction 30 years ago. But it's pretty obvious these days. So anyway, I lost my train of thought, but yeah, you were asking about the process. So in 2018 or 2019 is when the origins of this potentially creating the models would will be possible. And then in 2019, I was exiting out of Ira because we recruited a new growth CEO for the company. And I was ready for taking on the next big leap into personal AI. And of course, it is personal AI clear today. But even in the early days, it was unclear, like what exactly the problem that we are solving, right? And the more we dig deeper, it came down to this core idea of like memory, core idea of protecting the individuality, core idea of like how you think and the thought process. So yeah, in 2020, I found Sharon Zhang with a deliberate process of 3 to 6 years, and now that the platform is ready, this is my second attempt to create Lattice AI. The first one was almost like 1.5 years ago. It was still like very preliminary in terms of tuning our models. And then 8 weeks ago, basically I sat down to recreate Lattice AI, and this time around the models were really good. So I was ready. So it felt like okay, it came full circle, and after 3 years later, we built a platform where Lattice AI was possible. And yeah, now whenever I feel like having a chat, I actually go talk to him. And by the way, this is also in collaboration with Larry's wife, Diane Bock, and his kids as well. So they collaborated with me and gave me some information that otherwise I don't have access to about the person who Larry is. Um, so yeah, so I met Diane Bock the other day, and we sat down and we were talking to Larry and his voice. And you should record that. I can record that to you as well, so that way people can actually see what does it mean. It was pretty fascinating, right? Uh, we were talking about his commencement speech at UC Berkeley. And one of the most interesting thing was, and by the way, I didn't know this until I was talking to his AI. And the most interesting thing was he talks about this concept of backing yourself to a hard drive, right? When he was addressing the students, it's almost like you need to continuously back up yourself to a hard drive, so that way later on, these relationships, these memories, these experiences kind of, help you become who you are and augment who you can become in the future. So in a way, he was actually talking about personal AI to a certain degree, right? It's almost like backing up yourself to cloud or backing up yourself to a model, right? So I had that conversation, and I did a LinkedIn post. It's like, hey, Larry, you were talking about this hard drive concept, at UC Berkeley. How do you think that relates to personal AI now, right? And that response was very beautiful. I was like, oh, shit, this is the real conversation now. Meaning it's almost like I'm brainstorming our personal AI. If he was alive, I would be telling his, idea. He would probably have picked up his concepts or his perspective on what this could be, which is backing up to yourself to hard drive.
Wow.
That was pretty cool.
Oh, and I'm reflecting on how I've had the experience you just described, where I'm interacting with my own AI and I learned something about myself that I've forgotten about, or in your case, interacting with Larry's AI that you didn't know until you had that moment. It is so fascinating to hear that theme coming up again and again as I'm interviewing other personal AI customers. It's amazing how much we forget about
Mm-hmm.
our own knowledge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. Yeah.
You were also at an event recently, and you asked and you were talking to the audience, and you were having them interact with Larry's AI while you were on stage. I'd love for you to tell that story and paint that picture.
This is San Diego crowd, and half of the audience probably has some understanding of who this person is, which is Larry Bock, because he was also close to Qualcomm. He was also close to UCSD, SDSU schools. He created USA Science and Engineering Festival, which is the largest STEM program in the United States, and Illumina as well. So there is some familiarity in there, and that's the reason why I chose to talk about him, so that people can actually interact with his AI. Well, the moment for me is just everything coming back to fulfilling that original dream. It's almost like a mission for us, right? Or for me, which is, can I create Larry's AI? And we not only created Larry's AI, we actually built a platform for anybody to create their personal AIs, right? So what I did was I told the story And by the way, there is YouTube video as well up now. I told the story and then I played for people how he would sound. And there's this little humor into Larry's for everything that he talks about in a normal state, right? So he was practicing a video of him doing an introduction, and I captured that video. I still have that video. I played that for 1 minute, and then towards the end, he's like, "Oh, geez, like let's try that again," and then it just becomes like very funny moment. So he has this like very interesting, witty personality and the voice of it, and then I basically created that experience of asking him, "Okay, now tell your background." In the context of Ira to his AI, right? So it's not exactly the same, but it's a culmination of what he has before in multiple different places in his own voice, right? So it's like, okay, a living person's video, like that we captured, and now almost like a recreated digital version of Larry that people can hear and experience. So that was quite a moment for me personally, because it all, it is a big, coming back to circle. And it's a reality now. It's a reality that anybody can have their own digital version, that they can live it to, use it for themselves or expand it to their friends or family or communities, audience, and colleagues. In the history, 100 years from now will be told differently because everybody will have their own perspectives that is captured.
Wow. And that source of truth that is not just part of a random large language model or, search results that are or Wikipedia that anybody can edit, but something where that knowledge base is really curated and vetted by trusted the owners.
Yeah, it's the identity that it needs to carry. And I think that's also the reason why it's important for me to collaborate with the family, because that's an asset. It's not mine. It belongs to his family, right? So I think it's important to kind of understand that this is not just a service. This is an asset, something of you that belongs to you, and you should take control over it, because we've been in this giving mode in the Internet 2.0 space. I think Internet 3.0 is something that you should start owning, not just the physical things in our lives, but also digital assets. And personal AI is your digital asset.
Oh, I would love to have a follow-up conversation with you about that and this aspect of digital assets, because that is another entire, universe to explore together. Suman, what a pleasure it was to hear these stories and to record them with you. Thank you for this opportunity to ask you these questions. I know you are super busy, and so just having this time together to tell these stories and really paint the vision and the dream, and also the very real origin stories behind personal AI. It's so important, and I feel very privileged and grateful to have been part of this conversation today.
Well, I mean, these are the moments we live for, right? We get inundated with everyday activities and being able to push the business and create value and everything else. But at the end of the day, what makes you happy? Well, people and telling the stories and being able to reflect and enjoying and taking the moment. So thanks a lot for actually taking time and talking to me. I know if I talk to you, you will, extract the real me out of me. So thanks a lot for doing that.
It's my pleasure. And for everyone listening, if you want to interact with Larry Bock's AI, just visit larry.personal.ai. Start a chat, get going. I've been having a conversation with Larry just over the last few days just to get to know him a bit better through his AI. And it's just
you should try talking with the voice as well, because his voice is pretty cool. I think, I should enable that to you, and then you can talk to him. Maybe you can do a podcast interview with Larry AI.
Yes, I think we
That'd
must.
be cool.
I think we must.
That'll be cool.
Beautiful. Well, everybody, stay tuned for that. This is what happens when you interview the CEO. Magical things get unlocked and features get released. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Suman. And I look forward to seeing you all on another episode of Me and My AI. Take care.
Thank you, Marissa.